So good morning and welcome to Harry and Lisa live, definitely not at 10 a.m. for 10 minutes today. So we had some tech issues a couple of weeks ago where the system didn't want to play and we couldn't go live on Facebook, and we've spent this morning just putting a little spreadsheet together to talk to you about systems and processes, and now that's just decided to close itself. So I am going to reopen it. Hopefully that's saved without being too naughty. Let's open, there we go. Right, so
we're getting there.
So yesterday, Harry talked you through some of the systems and process review. So today we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into system and process review. If you are trying to automate some of your financial systems, some of your processes, you could just go straight out and say, okay, I need a cloud accounting system. I want, I want Xero, or I want QuickBooks. You might post a message in Facebook and ask recommendations. You might use something that your friend has used. You could use something your accountant recommends. So you're probably more likely to get it right if you use the system that your accountant recommends, because they know your processes, or they should do. So the challenge is to understand your own processes. So you don't have to map them, you don't have to think about them beforehand, but there are a number of reasons why you should. And that includes understanding what all your processes are, what the component parts are, where your controls are, where the risks are of it going wrong, where the bottlenecks might be in your business. And we see so many people, and we do consultancy for a lot of people that have perhaps tried Xero or QuickBooks or something else, and then found out that it doesn't do quite what they want because they haven't looked at their processes beforehand. So they think the system doesn't do what they want. So in some cases, it's a case of you aren't using the system to its full capabilities because you don't understand what your processes are. And sometimes it's a case of you've used the entirely wrong system. So we've seen people on ClearBooks and cash flow and the much smaller, simpler, cheaper systems because they've gone based on price, when what they actually need is a more sophisticated system with more controls and more process abilities inside it. So Harry, why don't you talk through some of the experiences we've had with some of the consultancies that we've done and the big issue we found there.
Yeah. So with one of these consultancy contracts, we went in, had a look at the client's underlying processes. They had different departments operating within their business, and we had a look at their various processes. And to be fair, when we sort of interviewed each department individually, there was various stages through their process where they were missing information, they were receiving it, it wasn't being passed over to the next team who needed it, and basically each process had an underlying element which was broken or missing or could easily be improved, and there was other elements which they hadn't even thought about which could be included in their process, and basically they had a mismatch of basically spreadsheets and bits and bobs here
many
and there.
Spreadsheets, wasn't it? It's a whole cottage industry of spreadsheets where everybody had their own little process all set up on their desktop in their own little spreadsheet, and nothing matched or correlated, or it was a real challenge trying to get a set of management accounts out for them that anybody agreed with or understood, because
none of the processes spoke to each other, and there was no underlying formalized, this is how it's done. There was no synchronization between the system whatsoever, because every system was its own individual little micro entity.
So how much was this costing them a month to maintain?
The irony is they could have used the system to resolve the issue. You would have thought low cost, but instead, because they had so many mismatch, basically it was employee's wage. So I think they had an external consultant for say £1,000 a month on average to help try and fix these systems which weren't quite communicating. And the reality of the situation is every problem they could have, every problem they had and encountered could have easily been resolved by a system. So and I'm not being funny, but you can get a lot of systems for less than £1,000 a
Yeah,
month.
absolutely.
So you're pretty sport for choice.
So let's share our screen and we'll take a look at the process review. So we've got a 4-step process, or a 4.5-step process if you need the extra bit in the middle, to help you understand where your priorities lie and what you're doing. So let me share my screen with you very quickly. And there we go, and let me enlarge this. So if you watched yesterday's video, you'll have seen this before. What we've done is tidied it up a little bit and created a bit of a download for you. So we'll download this a little bit later, so you can start working through this if you want to. Now, Harry, do you want to talk us through this first one for understanding how each of your core processes is structured, who's responsible for it, and how it's controlled? So what would you look at first?
So this is the one we covered a little bit on yesterday. We want to understand the trigger points. So we want to understand what is actually triggering each underlying process. And we want to look at it from a category perspective or a department perspective. So you might look at sales, your purchases, banking. So we've listed some of the items which you might consider here.
We've done this at a super high level, haven't we? So it could be sales invoices and sales quotes if that is more comfortable for you, but we've just looked at sales.
Yeah. Then we need to understand exactly how data is gathered. So we need to understand the actual source of the data. Then there's always going to be an owner for the given process. So someone somewhere down the line is going to be responsible for handling that data, processing that data, etc. And it might be more than one contact. Then we need to understand how the data is actually input. So what data is gathered, how is it input, and then the next step we have is how, of course, is this data escalated? So we'll have some various controls in place. And what you might find is if you've got more than one staff member especially, this step is really important because you might have one staff member escalate it up to a different staff member who might escalate it to another. So it's important to understand exactly how that process then gets moved on.
Yeah, and that could also relate to sort of timing as well. So if you've got a quote raised, for example, it might be referred to somebody else to check. But also, if a quote is raised, you need to then have something in your process that means that in 7 days' time you follow up on that quote, or at the end of the month you follow up on that quote. Whatever your timeline is for quotation follow-up, you need to be able to understand A, what that timeline is and what is your sort of de facto benchmark, and B, can your system accommodate that? Is there a control or a mechanism in place that allows you to monitor those elements? So one of the common things that we see, for example, is people using Receipt Bank. And Receipt Bank is a great tool for bringing items into your Xero or QuickBooks account. But quite often, if there isn't enough information on the receipt, that receipt comes into Receipt Bank and it gets stuck. So it's sat there as an item in Receipt Bank where there's not enough information. So it can't process it to the system that it needs to send to. So what the person does is it sees that it's not there and they send it through again. So Receipt Bank recognises that it's a duplicate, so it doesn't process it. So the person thinks the system's broken, but the system isn't broken. There's a bottleneck in the process where either the receipt was too faded and isn't good enough quality, or it's missing information. So there needs to be a step in that process to maybe once a week or once a month to review Receipt Bank to check for those missing documents. Sometimes documents can get stuck on your phone where you've taken a picture of it, you think you've pressed submit, but you haven't. So, you know, these things do happen, and you need to understand for each of the steps in your process where that control, where that bottleneck might happen, and therefore how you need to move that process forward. And setting things out in this way will help you understand these. Now, I think it's also quite important to say that that the spreadsheet that we've got here and all the tools that we're giving you today, these are really, really high level. So you're just looking at, you know, inputs, outputs, sources of data, where you want things to go, what the controls are. You can create great convoluted spreadsheets or great convoluted process maps. You can have, you know, your yellow stickies all over a window or a wall to see where things go and what's happening. And that is really, really great. But sometimes that in itself becomes too complicated. So we're focusing on the super simple today to help you understand what you can do to look at your own processes and how you can then get those into a system and automate where necessary.
Yeah, and we need to understand how to get from A to B as efficiently as possible.
Which is where this process map comes in. So this is the one that you talked them through yesterday, Harry, isn't it? And again, we've expanded this so that it's covering the sort of 5 or 6 main areas that we start looking at. You can expand it if you click on here. You can expand this into more detail and add other processes, and then either indent or outdent your steps as you need to. So when you start using it, it becomes more obvious how this works. Now, this doesn't take into account what could happen if you've got decision trees and, you know, what happens in this scenario, what happens in that scenario. Again, you can do that if you want to, but for this purpose, all we're interested in is from getting from A to B as simply as possible.
Yeah.
And making sure that you understand your sales process, your purchases process, and understand what you need to do and how you need to get from your start point to your end point in each process.
And 9 times out of 10, if you look at them in isolation from one another, you're more likely to work out what the bottlenecks are, what the pain points are, just looking at, say, my purchase process is this.
Yeah.
And for some reason or other, my purchase process somewhere down the line isn't quite working how I'd like it to. If you look at it in isolation, it stands out much more rather than doing this cross-matching. This goes here, this interlinks with that, which interlinks with that.
Yeah.
You can overcomplicate it. So actually, yeah, A to B as efficiently as possible. And it's really important to do this because obviously people look at process mapping, they might think, well, why is it relevant? Why
I don't
do I
need to do it. I'm just going to buy a
Yeah.
system.
But the reality is, if you just hop in, buy a system without looking at any of these processes, one, how do you know the system's doing what you want it to do? How do you know you can get something better for the same money? Or how do you know you can satisfy more of your issues with a different system to the one you've chosen? And most importantly, one that we do see is if you choose the wrong system, it can be quite a big problem, because changing systems may not be painful. It can be painful if it's done wrong or if you've chosen a system for all the wrong reasons. So the underlying choice is to make sure you choose the right systems, the right processes first time, so you, 1, save yourself money, 2, save yourself a lot of time, and 3, make sure you satisfy all of your processes anyway, because there's nothing more annoying than having to do workarounds because the system doesn't do what you want it to do in the first place.
And you need to have understood what your process is. So for example, let's go back to sales again. If your sales process involves a quotation that somebody needs to sign off and approve, you want a system that allows for sales quotes, or a system that has an add-on that can enable sales quotes that integrates with the system. If you have a process internally where a member of staff might create an invoice, but you want that invoice escalated to somebody else for approval, you need that step and that control in your system. Now, we've seen people who do this, and then they've moved to an accounting system that doesn't have that functionality, and then they create another workaround where it's all printed off and there's a paper trail. But in theory, and what has happened in the past, is that person's then been able to issue that invoice accidentally from the accounting system because nobody's thought about the controls they need in the first place. Now, as small business owners, we all think we know all of our processes, but it's so easy to forget some core steps when you're looking at new systems and tools to do things, that you don't do this and you pick a system that doesn't do quite what you want. And then maybe you spend 2 or 3 months testing it, you've invested your time, your money, your effort, and you're frustrated, and 3 to 6 months down the line, you're no further forward than you were 6 months ago, but you are more frustrated, you've lost time, you've lost money. So these kinds of activities, whilst they are time consuming, can have huge amounts of benefit. So I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, really, really important.
Now, these are the 2 steps that Harry's talked you through about process mapping. And there's a couple of other steps that I want to add to this. So we're going to set this for you as a little bit of homework. So over the next couple of days, what we'd like you to do is take this tool, download it, and then have a look at what processes that you have at the moment that you would like to automate, that you don't have automated already, and then throw that challenge back at us. How do we automate it for you in a system or a process or a tool that we don't already have? So let's consider where our week is being spent. So we're looking at our financial activities only. So we're trying to understand where your time is being spent, and are you automating your most time consuming purchases? So again, we've split these between sales, purchases, banking. You could break them out into much more detail and try to work out what percentage of your time is spent doing these various activities. So if, for example, that 10% of your day is spent raising sales invoices each morning, what can we do to improve that, to automate that? Are you producing them on a spreadsheet? Are you producing them in a Word document and then having to reproduce these and add them to your system? Are you going to your clients and writing it all down on paper, then coming home and raising the invoice on a system? So whereas you might be able to just leave the client that moment, and you may be able to raise that on an app while sitting in the car outside. It may be that you could create a quote and then just convert that quote to a sales invoices. So there are many things that can be done to improve these processes. If you find that 10% of your time each month, perhaps, maybe you spend 2 or 3 days each month doing credit control, then maybe credit control is your time limiting activity. The problem with these time activities is that if you run out of time, they don't get done. And if they don't get done, you don't get your cash in. So again, it becomes a real issue. So maybe credit control is the task that we want to try and automate. So by understanding what you do, how you do it, what activities you're spending your time doing, and the time that you're spending, you're consuming doing them, that helps you then define which ones you need to automate or which ones you might want to think about automating.
Yeah, it's really important if you're spending, say, 0% of your time on credit control and 50% of your time on purchases. I know straight away you can see, actually, I should be able to improve that, so I can devote some more time to credit control. Or maybe you actually end up saving yourself time overall by automating more than one process.
Yeah, and in some cases we see, people are spending an awful lot of time reviewing their VAT returns. Rather bizarrely, we see quite a few people who don't understand enough about their systems, so they enter all of their data, say, into QuickBooks or into Xero, and then do their VAT returns outside of Xero. And then you find that there's a disconnect between what the VAT return that they've submitted and the VAT return that Xero's calculated. So, it ultimately ends up being out of sync and non-reconciled. So look at all of these activities and try and estimate the amount of time that you're spending. So take a week, for example, to try and work out where your time is spent on your financial processes. Now, if it's too difficult for you or not immediately apparent where you're spending your time, and you may be surprised on some of these activities what is taking you the time to deliver, you could work through a timesheet. Now, this is one of those good old-fashioned time tracking activities where we're looking at, it's your time and workflow. We've probably all done this at some point in our lives in a corporate environment, but they are really, really helpful. So print a timesheet off, have it on your table, buy a diary, or if you've got one, use the one that you've got already, and start mapping or logging the time that you're doing each day, the time that you're spending each day on each of these activities. If you think you're spending 10% of your day doing an activity, you might be surprised to find that actually you're spending much longer or a much shorter amount of time doing that. What we do often find is that actually, rather than spending time working on an activity, what we have is many interruptions. So you might spend an hour in the morning doing your invoicing, but actually that's only a 10 or 15 minute job. What you had was half a dozen disruptions or interruptions in the middle of that. It might be people popping in with a query, it might be phone calls or people dropping around to see you. These kind of things are hugely time consuming. So if you have that kind of interruption in your day, that kind of distraction, is there a process of eliminating that or prioritizing your task? Or, perhaps you have a closed door policy for the first 2 hours of the day while you focus on the things that are most important in your business. Perhaps you have do not disturb on your phones so that people don't come through to you. So, for example, while we're preparing and doing these Facebook Lives, Harry and I are in a different room, so we don't get interrupted and we don't get disturbed by things that are going on, because it's important for us to make sure that the content that we're delivering is clear and concise and well delivered. So we don't want people constantly popping in and, you know, interrupting what we're doing.
And we have a sign on the door to say we're in here, basically.
Yeah.
So,
so think about structuring your day so that your time is spent more efficiently, and track your day to find out what you're doing. Now, you often find that 80% of your time is spent doing 20% of the least valuable activities, and maybe, you know, 80% of your time is working on your least profitable clients. The 80-20 rule is really quite interesting, and it's very, when you start measuring the time that you're spending or the money that you're spending or the clients that you have, you often find they fit into this 80-20 ratio, which is really quite interesting, because then what happens if you're spending 80% of your time on your 20% least profitable clients? Well, that's, you know, that's crazy, isn't it? So what happens if you're spending 80% of your time on your least valuable processes, where you could be doing something more interesting instead, like focusing on your clients? So let's look at this. Now, you don't have to use daily timesheet. This is more for those that really struggle to identify what they're doing during the day. And there are many. We often ask people what they do and how they've structured their day, and they get to the end of the day and say, you know what, I can't remember.
yeah.
That's really common.
Yeah, if you ever look back and say, I don't know what I've done today, that means you'll probably be using the daily timesheet, because actually you might be surprised.
Yeah.
And what you think takes an hour takes 2 hours. What you think takes half an hour, it's taken 10 minutes. You'd be surprised. And what you might find is that you have this whole 2-hour block where you genuinely don't know what's happened, because there's been so many interruptions. You couldn't physically allocate it to a single job, which means, how's the process getting done? If you're getting interrupted all the time, how do you know that process is actually getting done? Maybe your pain point is the interruptions.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Or that the process is being done properly and you're not making mistakes. So that's another issue, is trying to make sure that your time is spent as productively as possible. So we have one more tool for you here today, and this is a daily planner. So most people have seen a daily planner, and this one is looking at your number one priority for the day. So this is more concerned with how to do more in less time, and you do more in less time by focusing and prioritizing. Now, what we want you to do in this instance is look at this from a financial perspective. So don't worry about the rest of your business tasks for the moment. I mean, you can have a separate one for that, that's fine. But this particular planner is focused on your daily financial tasks. We want to know what your number one priority is for today. So what is the one thing that you must do to keep delivering an outstanding service to your client? The thing that's going to generate cash, the thing that's going to generate an invoice, the thing that's going to create more value in your business. So this is what's going to help you service and keep servicing your clients. What is the task that you've been avoiding and therefore should do first? And again, I'm talking from a financial perspective. So it might be to ring that supplier and complain about a product, to ring somebody and ask for a refund for something that you don't have. It's something that you really don't want to do. It might be credit controlling and chasing that difficult client. It might be dealing with a customer complaint and ringing that client up and say, right, okay, we stuffed up on this occasion, that's what we need to do. But whatever it is, it's that task that you really don't want to do. So let's get it done first thing today, get it out of the way and off your plate. And once that's done, you tick the box.
And that one's really important, actually, because if you do a job that you hate, strange as this sounds, you roll off the adrenaline, it's really rewarding. And you'll straight away hop into the number one priority for the day, the number two, etc. So just do it. You'd be amazed. It really does.
Yeah. I think
it really does do magic.
The way to try and think about your day, if you want to be more productive in your day, you need to worry about servicing your clients. You need to do the things that you really don't want to do. There's something that's necessary and awful and horrible. There are usually 3 things that are really key. So try and get 3 priorities achieved a day, and then more than 3 is probably too much. There's space here for who you need to call today that you can tick off once it's done, who you need to follow up with today, and then you tick them off with and get them done. And when we say follow up with, this could be a sales invoice, a sales quote, something that's going to help move your business forward. So it has a financial impact, it has a business generating impact, it grows your sales activity. So remember, we're focused on financial gain, revenue, profit. And then what tasks do you need to do once you've actioned your priority tasks? Sometimes there is more time in the day and you can then focus on getting these other things done. Now, these may not be financially focused. That doesn't really matter. That's there for you to add all the other things that you probably need to do that you don't have time to do in each day. So that might be, you know, managing your staff, doing a HR review, that kind of thing. And again, equally important, but not financially focused. Mm-hmm. Now, we also want you to consider, what is the one action that you can take today that will take you one step closer to your goal? So for us, it's doing this Facebook Live. And the one action that we can do to grow in our business, we're trying to grow the Bloody Brilliant Business community. We're trying to grow the Bloody Brilliant Business Club. And we want to have each of these providing an income for us. So for us, this is probably our most important client of the day. And we have changed our priorities. Now, how is this relevant to systems and processes? Good question. The reason that I've brought this in here today is because quite often your one top priority, the thing that you need to do today, is something that doesn't have a process for. If it's that important and it must be done. So for many, it's actually credit control. It's often the credit control. So getting that cash in. So if we understand what your priorities are for that day, and it has it's a job or a task that can be automated, we want to make sure we take the time out from you doing this manually, or this number 2, 3 priority manually each day, taking those tasks out so that they're automated to allow you to do more of this, which is going to take you one step closer to your goal. And remember, these are the goals that we set right at the beginning of this journey. So all of these can be printed off. We've talked probably for about half an hour now, which is a bit longer than we would normally, but this is quite a key thing. From tomorrow, we're going to start looking more at systems and the actual systems that you can use to run your business. Today, we just wanted to focus on the process and understanding what it was, how you map it, how you understand what needs to be automating, how you prioritize your day, how you work out all of those tasks that need to be automated, and make sure that you don't miss something in that process. So what we'd like you to do, this is the first time we've probably given the group homework, is we'd like you to think about the processes that you have in your business and comment in the box below and let us know what processes are causing you the most difficulty, worry, most time consuming, the things that you need to automate that you perhaps haven't already, and we'll look at those for the rest of the week.
And don't just skip this thinking actually it's not got value. It has
huge amount of value.
If you think about it, imagine you're on a farm. You're not just going to start planting seeds if you haven't removed the weeds, you haven't ploughed the fields, and all you do if you cut those corners is you have to go back and do rework, which is the thing we're trying to avoid. We're trying to save you time, we're trying to save you money. So really, 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 really worth doing this. Do not skip it.
Yeah.
And
or what you find is you're a busy fool because you're still busy running those manual processes that you don't have time to automate, which again is what we're trying to eliminate. And missing your priorities and the things that are most important to you during the day.
And that frog list ends up longer and longer and longer.
And then you become really unhappy in your business, and then we hear an awful lot of that again. But that's another story for another day. So thank you very much for joining us in our definitely not 10 minutes at definitely not 10 o'clock today, and we'll see you tomorrow for a bit more systems and process. See you soon.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Harry.
And we are Chartered Management Accountants from Caseron Cloud Accounting Limited.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel for more videos like this.
Click on the link below to join our free Bloody Brilliant Business Bookkeeping group on Facebook, where we are live every weekday answering questions, sharing stories, and building profit-generating businesses that put more cash in your pocket.
If you want to learn more, or you want to take a deeper dive into any of the topics we have covered, join the Bloody Brilliant Business Club with tutorials, workbooks, cheat sheets, and checklists, which make it stupidly simple and brilliantly profitable to understand the financial stuff that you hate.
We'll see you there. Bye.
Bye.